Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Like you said, it's great. That's one of the good things about Zoom. I mean, I would have come anyway because of all that stuff we were talking about. And I might have never left, and you would have been like, "There's that guy snooping around um, the schoolhouse." Yeah, no, I'm really pleased that you asked me to come, and I hope that we have a good time tonight. I know there's snow on the way, so I think this is a good thing to do is to talk about someplace far away where it's really hot, and not Boca Raton, but Jerusalem. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about my new book that came out last fall called True Raiders. And I have some slides that I'm going to um, show you. Just give me 1 second because it's always a thing to show slides. And it's never as easy. Okay, here we go. All right, can everybody see this?
Yes, it's
I
good.
see it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go. I'm not gonna turn into a boring college professor and lull everybody to sleep. Hopefully not. But I have some. I think pictures are always good to try and help tell a story because I don't get too many pictures when I actually write the book. So I like to show pictures in libraries. Um, so today we're going to talk about the Ark of the Covenant and kind of everyone has a different way that they've come to know about the Ark. Maybe you're come from a religious background or you learned about it in school. The Ark is the legendary. Just for those of you that might not know, the it appears in the Old Testament. It's a box made of wood, encrusted in gold, and inside could be a number of things. Most people think that they were the fragments of the Ten Commandments, and here you see the Ark. You know, whoever holds the Ark, their army can never be defeated. Is one of the stories that you know if you have the Ark, you will have wisdom, but you will also have power. And to be honest, how do most of us know about the Ark? It's Raiders of the Lost Ark. And that's how I came to this story and how I came to the Ark of the Covenant is um, I love this movie. I saw it as a kid and I saw it with my dad and my little brother. And I don't know, for some reason, I mean, I was lucky. I was in the generation that saw Star Wars and all those movies in the theaters, but for me it was always Raiders. And I don't know why. And I've kind of thought about that for most of my life. Because it's kind of I think it's kind of sad because I went on to get a PhD, and I think if I'm being really honest with myself, I think part of that is because of Dr. Jones, and I think that's pretty sad that I did all this school for a Steven Spielberg movie. But it's too late now. But it really was about this movie that there was something um, about it that it wasn't like Star Wars that took place in space. I mean, this took place kind of in a version of the real world. And that arc was just something that was the ultimate what if question. The ark was in the Old Testament, and so it hasn't been seen for thousands of years. And some people, believe that it was real and that it is a thing, and maybe we can still find it. And some people think, well, it's a metaphor, just a story, or I knew my job was kind of not to answer that, but I wanted to find out more about that story. And years later, I read this little bit in Simon Sebag Montefiore's book, Jerusalem, which is a biography of the city. And it's a terrific book. And he has about a page or so about this expedition, the Parker expedition, that in 1909 went after the Ark. And I read this paragraph and I felt like my face was melting off, just like the movie, right? Because I couldn't believe of all the stories in the world that Raiders of the Lost Ark might have had a real historical precedent to it. Because these are the stories I really love, where kind of the real and the unreal kind of come together, and we find out the real story behind it. So I started researching this story because I knew I had to write about it. And there was very little information to go on that this expedition even happened. And one thread that I had was um, the leader of it, Monty Parker, who we'll learn about in just a second, was an earl. He was the Earl of Morley. Um, and there is an existing Earl of Morley. So I thought, well, maybe the current Earl of Morley has some of the records or knows something about his predecessor. So, I'm just a kid from Cleveland, so I have no idea how to go about addressing an Earl. So I got out, I checked out these books, and this is just one kind of ancestral line of how these things work, and they're extremely complicated. I know a lot of people are into the British peerage, that they call it, and I was just not one of them because I just never had a reason to. But it's fascinating, but it's really hard. And I eventually here's another kind of instructions for how to address someone, an earl or a countess or a baroness. So, I'm not to brag, but I did my homework here, and I sent this letter and I found out to the Earl of Morley, and I had to address it, my dear Lord Morley. That took me like 3 months to figure that out. And then, of course, I got no response. So I thought the book was dead. I thought this great story that I knew was out there was nowhere to be found. And then I found this guy. This is Dr. Walter Juvelius, and you can't make these names up. He was a Finnish biblical scholar, and he's the one who kind of gets things going, and he helped me kind of find another way into the story. And he's important because he was convinced that he had found a secret code in the book of Ezekiel, a cipher that revealed to him the location of the Ark of the Covenant. And he was so, and it's very elaborate. I'll show you a picture of it in a little bit. It kind of goes every third word, you take a letter, or every third letter, you take a letter and then the word, and then you kind of bring it all together and it forms sentences with some variation here and there. He was absolutely convinced that his code, his secret code, was real. And this is kind of we have books like the Da Vinci Code and things like that. Secret codes were really a big deal at the turn of the century. People thought that there were codes in Shakespeare. There were many people that were saying there were codes in the Bible. So it wasn't kind of a new thing. So he somehow hooked up with a group of British businessmen, and they called themselves the Syndicate, which when you're a writer is really awesome because then you get to keep writing the Syndicate over and over, and they sound really mysterious, which sounds much better than businessmen. But anyway, he got them to be interested in his venture, and they have a meeting, and he shows them the code. And he has maps alongside his code, and this is one of his maps. and it shows how words correspond to different measurements and distances, and kind of sorry about that, secret chambers that go down, and he would show them, read from Ezekiel and then do his calculations, and the words, the sentences that unfolded were, walk 40 feet, turn around the curve, and behold the fire of God. And the syndicate people were just astonished that this was kind of appearing out of thin air, out of these Bible passages, and they were really interested in going. But they needed a leader, and this is where they turned to kind of the main character. Though the book kind of has many main characters, is Monty Parker. And his first name was Montague. And I was so glad when I found out that his friends called him Monty, because then I could just call him Monty. So it's the little things we writers get interested in. And he was an ex-soldier, and he was the son of an earl. But what's important is he was the second son. So he did not inherit the estate, the title, the lands from his father. He of course was still in a position of privilege and some wealth, but it was nothing compared to what his brother got. So I think that's important to understanding why he would do this, go on this quest. But Monty was interested from the get-go, because he realized whoever found the Ark of the Covenant might be the richest person in England, save the royal family. So he was really motivated by dollar signs. And this is a picture of the family estate, Saltram House, which you can still visit. In England. The people were really helpful to me, and it's an amazing house. There's other reasons why he said yes to lead the expedition. This is one of the other reasons. This is Ava Astor. She was the famous divorcee from the Astor fortune in New York, and then moved to London. And the newspapers called her the most beautiful woman in the world. And she had suitors, as they would list in the newspaper almost the entire length of the page. Everyone, wanted to marry Ava because she was extremely wealthy. And she was, quote unquote, the most beautiful woman in the world. So anyway, she had a relationship with Monty. They were seen at all these parties, and were talking closely. And reading these gossip columns of the early 1900s are really great, because it's really scandalous when people start talking to each other. But so there's this great story that they're at this a horse race, and she has kind of set her eyes on someone else, because Monty's just a soldier, somebody with more wealth, more standing, and she's kind of letting Monty go, and he says, well, I'm not going to be around anyway. And she asks, well, why is that? And he says, well, I'm going to go look for the Ark of the Covenant. And to me, that's just like the greatest response to being dumped ever, is just saying, well, that's okay. I'm going to go find, the holiest relic in human history. And of course, when she hears that, she pauses and she says, well, if you find it, then we'll talk. Which is kind of a testament to how she was too. And I should have said in the beginning, I'm not a spoiler person as far as giving things away. So I won't give away like anything big about the book in case you want to read it, or even better, check it out of your local library. So there's a lot of stuff. Well, I'll kind of stop just short. I will say that Ava comes back into the story in a very interesting way. And she's one of my favorite people that I discovered in research. So then they go after the Ark, and they get this group together, and it's kind of a motley crew of ex-soldiers and Monty's friends and psychics, and they're going after, um, like I said, one of the most sought after possessions in human history, and certainly um, held to be holy by two of the major religions. And this is where they go. They go to Jerusalem, just outside Jerusalem. This is the time period they went, right along the hills. And they hadn't been there. Some of them had gone forth earlier as scouts, but um, they had no archaeologists with them either. They were just going to follow Juvelius's code and start digging, which is, to us sitting here in the 21st century, it sounds like sheer madness, right? What would you do if someone came to you and said, "Well, I know where the Ark is. Can you fund me, or let's go?" I don't think you would go. I mean, I don't think I would go, but they did go. And I think that's part of why I wanted to write this book. So they go, and they really go, like I said, with the worst intentions. They're looking to find the Ark and get rich, and they lie to the locals and say, "Oh, we're digging because we're going to build a school, or we're going to build a hospital," and that's really evil, I think. But if they would have stayed that way, I don't think I would have written the book. But that changes, and I think, to me, that's very interesting, too. That being on this quest made them realize that the thing they were looking for started to become more real once they got to Jerusalem, and kind of made them more made things more important, I guess. So this is Monty. He's in Jerusalem. He was a photographer, took a lot of pictures. He may have taken some film, but no one's been able to find it. He had his trademark kind of captain's hat, which I like because it's kind of like Indiana Jones, who has his hat. Monty had his as well. One of the places they focus on in Jerusalem is a place called the Virgin's Fountain, and it's a set of stairs that goes into the underground, and there's a natural fountain. And there's many stories about this fountain. It is supposedly the place where Mary washed the swaddling clothes after Jesus was born. It's also the place where it feeds into the place where Jesus famously heals a blind person. So there's all these biblical stories in these places, and all of a sudden the places are real. And that's what's happening at this time in history too, is that biblical archaeology was just a huge thing, because it became a way of people being able to prove that their faith was real. So something that had always been, and we see this too in the Crusades and relics and these kind of things, but back then it was, once Palestine and Jerusalem was open, um, people were going and finding things that were either came back to Britain or England, or were written about by the people who saw them as kind of evidence that their faith was real. So this is where they focus most of their attention, is at the Virgin's Fountain. When they get there, it's completely stopped up and they have to start digging. Here's another photo of them kind of, doing their thing. They're doing what's calling dropping a shaft, which is, they would put in holes and vertical tunnels through the earth. And here are a couple members of the expedition. You see the tunnels are very small, cramped, and Jerusalem is riddled with tunnels. And the question became, what were the tunnels for? Were they natural tunnels? Were they man-made tunnels? Did they have to do with things of the Bible? And most importantly, was the Ark here? Because the stories that the Ark last appears when Jerusalem is sacked and it disappears from the Old Testament, and we never hear about it again. And it doesn't seem to have been destroyed. It doesn't seem to have been taken as a spoil of war, because it doesn't show up in the enemy's treasuries. But this is why most people think, well, it was hidden. It was secreted away because it was um, the center of the temple. They also focus on this place, Hezekiah's tunnel, which is famous in the Bible. That's, one team starts on one side, another starts on another. They meet in the middle. And Juvelius's code has very provocative verses about this tunnel, and they keep going through it. When they get there, it's the water is up to almost up to their necks. I recreate a lot of this in the book, and I feel kind of bad about it, because since it's come out, a lot of people who've read it come up to me and say, why did you do this to me? I'm claustrophobic. And so I feel terrible. I should have put a disclaimer. It's very close in close quarters and close walls on each side. So like I mentioned before, I mean, part of what drew me to this story too is it's kind of funny. These guys go, and their goal is to dig through all these tunnels to find the Ark of the Covenant, but they don't have an archaeologist in their group. And they suddenly realize that this is going to be a problem. So they meet this terrific guy. I think he might be my favorite guy in the book. His name's Father Vincent, and he's just a priest. He's not just a priest, but he's a priest who is in Jerusalem, and his hobby is archaeology, and he's really, really good at it. And so they bring him along onto the venture, and they don't tell him what they're looking for, and he just kind of does his thing. And what comes out of it is this fantastic archaeological study of the tunnels that is still used today. And he has some of the best passages in the book, I think, because he's the one he's a man of God, but he's also a scientist. So for him, those two, for kind of everyone else in the book, you can't like kind of have those two things at once. But for him, those two things coexisting is not even an afterthought. That he says, God made these tunnels, and man came and carved them, and he measures them out to the millimeter. So he's really great. And here's one of his maps of the inside of the Virgin's fountain, like I said, still used today. Here's the whole group of them all on donkey back. I could go through and name them, but it wouldn't be. They're a terrific cast of characters. As a writer, I love the stories where you can't make it up. There's an ex-professional cricket player. There's someone who helped build work on the underground. There's psychics that they bring along who get sick all the time because they can't go near the water. They're very seasick, very sensitive. And it's great. And this story, the story of this is they were all together. The workers weren't on strike because they were mad they weren't being paid enough, and the judge ruled in Mani's favor, and so they went back on these donkeys. And there's this terrific scene where the mayor of Jerusalem's donkey gets spooked and goes flying off, and half the company wrecks itself in a store that sells Turkish delight. So there's this scene where there's Turkish delight all over the streets, and everyone's kind of buried in it. So yeah, you can't make this stuff up. So back to how I found the story is I still wasn't having any luck with the Earl. But I started to find out that other people who went on the expedition had written about it. They had just written in other languages. So I found, Juvelius had written about it in Finnish, so I had to translate that. And this is another thing by someone who went who was Swedish. I found all these different sources, and of course, none of them agreed as to what happened on the expedition. So that kind of threw me. But then I realized, well, that makes for, I think, a better book, because then you can have all their voices in there and kind of have, kind of let the reader decide. Here's another picture. This is one of the earlier explorers of Jerusalem that I talk about in the book, Charles Warren. He goes into the tunnels and he finds lots of strange things. So, I mean, Monty Parker and they go in with this bizarre code and they're not finding too much. But when Warren went, he did find things that were really, um, I didn't want to write a book that was supernatural or an alien book, but I also wanted to be true to that idea of the ark, that, if it does exist, or if you believe it might have existed, or if it's even just a story, that it has that part of it too. And Warren was down in the tunnels and he found these, strange symbols that he thought were Phoenician letters way down below the surface of the earth. That this was much older than they thought it was, pre-Christian for sure, and pre tribes of the lost tribes, tribes of Judea too. And there's all these symbols that I found that were kind of connected. And this is a painting in Monty's house of Saltram, with the same kind of geometric symbols to it. And this story goes some really strange places. And I said, if I was going to write a story about, and some of this is really about conspiracy theory, the dangers of following it to the letter, but also the kind of lure of it too, that these guys are told, hey, I have the secret code that'll find the ark. Yeah, I know that's not going to be true, but what if it is? So I vowed that I would, follow this story wherever it led. And one place it led was to Jack the Ripper. And I can't stand Jack the Ripper. I mean, obviously, but stories or the books, I know some people love them, but Charles Warren, who was one of the explorers in this book, ended up afterwards being the police commissioner during the murders. And he is famously known for, one morning they find strange writing on the wall, and it's very much like him finding the writing on the wall underneath um, the earth in Jerusalem. And there's a lot of connections. I also found that somebody in the book ends up later in King Tut's tomb, being one of the first people to go inside. So I had to write about too, which is really ironic because, like I said, I hate Jack the Ripper and I really hate mummies too. But I had to write about both of them. And it's really crazy. And of course, there's evil in the book too. They dig deeper and they find out that, everything is not an Old Testament God or a New Testament God, that there are other gods of the Old Testament. And they're really scary. And they show up in Juvelius's code too. And this is Moloch. So eventually, the good news is I finally heard from the Earl. And we decided we were going to do a Zoom meetup. And I got nervous, what do I call him? And we went through it. I met his daughter first, who was terrific, Olivia Parker. And I met him and we went through the Zoom, and I said, thank you so much for, taking my or agreeing to meet with me, my Lord Morley, and he laughed and he said, call me Mark. So it goes to show that none of that. Sometimes you can do too much research, but anyway, so they had the records of the Parker expedition, and they'd given them to someone in Jerusalem, now currently working on history and archaeology, and they had all this great stuff, and they let me use it, and it's terrific because it was the final piece I needed, because here was Parker and other things. So this is part of Juvelius's code on the left. He talks about radium a lot. He thought the Ark would be full of radium, and as a way to deter people and be very dangerous. And on the right is Parker. Monty had the cipher translated, and it's full of all this financial stuff, and it's really great. So I wanted their story kind of ends. I thought it was interesting. Everyone's thinking about snow, and there's this point in the book where it snows in Jerusalem, and it's this really it's not a unique thing, but it's a rare thing. And actually, it's snowing in Jerusalem right now, because I had a friend I know who actually helped me on this book a lot. I saw on his Twitter feed that he said, "Oh, it's snowing in Jerusalem. Everyone's going crazy." So it snows when they're there, and they've been there for 2 years, and they haven't found too much. They have found some things, and they've had really crazy adventures, but they haven't found the Ark. And Monty kind of looks out, and there's enemies afoot. There's spies, trying to find their information and take over their digging rights. And Monty has his eye. There's one thing in the cipher that is very provocative, and this is the Dome of the Rock. This is one of the holiest sites in Jerusalem for all the religions, and the Golden Dome, and it is in the city, and it is absolutely forbidden to dig there. Inside is the foundation stone, which has different meanings for all the religions. It's this is where Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac, and God stayed his hand, and so on and so forth. There's all stories here. You can't dig there. Monty wanted to dig there because, if you see in the corner, there's a stairway that goes down underneath the foundation stone. And this is called the Well of Souls. And this was the place where Monty seemed to think that the cipher was leading him to, that maybe there was a tunnel from here to the tunnels they were digging in. And there were all these kind of stories and legends surrounding this place too, but he wasn't allowed to dig there. So of course he digs there. One night he disguises himself, and his crew disguise themselves as locals, as Arabs, and they go to the Dome of the Rock. They bribe the guard, and they start digging in the Well of Souls. They're found out, and they run. But it results in a riot in Jerusalem. Ark of Covenant reported missing, Jerusalem riots. This is the New York Times. Have Englishmen found the Ark of the Covenant? And they become wanted men in search of the lost Ark of the Covenant. Amazing story. And their story starts to come out, and the international community is just stunned that this happened. And they kind of disappear after that. And it took me a long time to kind of track down their different where they ended up after this. And it's really interesting. So I don't want to say what happens, and I don't want to say what happens here. This is a current photo, sort of current, of the Well of Souls, and you can go. It's a place of prayer. And this is a photo. They had changed the carpet, so they don't allow any kind of excavation work in here at all. But they changed the carpets a few years ago, and they put these photos on Facebook, and archaeologists and kind of conspiracy people too, like went through the roof because they saw this photo that underneath the uh, rugs was this symbol of the star. And it's always been an idea that underneath the Well of Souls is a cave. And in that cave could be the Ark or something else. And they saw this and said something's there. What I found in my book, did they find the Ark, is the question. And I'm not going to say because I want you to read the book. But I mean, I think if they would have found the Ark, we would have known about it. It's like the Titanic. You kind of know the ending. Or maybe if I found it, I'd be using it as a coffee table or something. But they did find something. For one, I think it did inspire parts of the movie, key parts of the movie. I talk about that a little bit at the end. So it was good for me to kind of come full circle. But what did they find? Like I said, I think they found something. And I found, right when I was finishing the book, I found these official documents that said the bulk of the antiquities of the Parker expedition were gone, but there were some that were locked in a vault. And it took me a while, but I found out what was in that vault. And I know that's kind of a cliffhanger, but they did find something. And I think that to me that was important. Maybe if they didn't find the Ark, they found something like it. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And I hope people heard that, because now, tell me you all heard that, right?
Yes, it was very good. Yep.
All right, good. Because I was in silence. It's weird. I'm like, oh no, maybe they didn't hear it. So how about any questions?
Brad, from all your research, what do you feel deep down about the Ark itself? Do you think someday it will be found?
Yeah, so
or do we not even know that it was real, which is another huge question.
Yeah, I think you can't say that enough, because we have no way. I mean, it shows up in the Old Testament. But that's the only place. There's a lot of people. I mean, it's fascinating because you see in a lot of different cultures, there's boxes. If you saw where I showed the pictures of King Tut's tomb, there's something in it. They call it the Anubis box. It looks exactly like the Ark. It has the long poles that you lift it on.
Right.
So I think it's a long cultural tradition, but who am I to say if the Ark was real? I mean, I'm not. I realize, that's not something I'm nowhere near qualified to say. I think in the book I say I do think it was something, and I think it was something real. I think I'm not answering your question at all.
I don't think anyone can.
I think this is going to sound really cliche, but I think stories are more powerful than things always. So I think it's kind of a story of the covenant, between God and his people,
Right.
that kind of turned it into whatever the box was. So I think the covenant came first, and I have like clues to, like, the cover of the book is where I think it all started. I have a lot of like little secret things in the book. But yeah, they could find it. I mean, one thing I will tell you, since this book came out, I get emails once every couple weeks it's always a guy, but I know where it is. I have the satellite photos. As soon as COVID's over, I'm going in. So people are really convinced that it's out there, and they know where it is. I mean, if someone were to find it, it would be a find of monumental proportions. But somebody could find it tomorrow. I don't know.
Right.
How would
What
you
do you
call
think?
your
Who
book?
asked me?
Fiction or a nonfiction?
The Ark or the book?
No, the book.
The book's
In what,
nonfiction.
in what category would you put it? Fiction or nonfiction?
I would put it in nonfiction, but I would also say that it's like the Ark. You can't really say 100% sure. That's why I love the Ark so much. You can't say 100% sure whether it existed. The only way is if you have a time machine, which we don't have, or if you have a lot of faith, right? So whenever I always write my books this way, that you kind of have to have a little faith and a little imagination, because I don't have a time machine. So I try to make it like a story and make it come alive a little bit. But no, it's definitely, this all happened.
Well, there are
Excuse me.
archaeological diggings right now as we're speaking. They dig all the time, not for the Ark, but for old Jerusalem, for the origins of the Hebrews and what happened to Jerusalem.
hmm
They're digging all the time. Are you documenting it?
I decided, since I'm not an archaeologist, to just stop when they stop. Because I felt like I could tell their story, because they weren't archaeologists either. But you're right. There's right. What's happening right now is it's almost foot by foot, and every foot is a struggle. Because people will dig, and then people will say you can't dig there, and then they'll try to dig some more. Like now, you can go through Hezekiah's tunnel. It's a tourist place. You can walk through. You take
Right.
your shoes off, and you wade through, and it's this great experience that for many is very powerful. Um, but yeah, there's so much there to be found, I think. I would love to see what they could find. I mean, I understand that the problems about digging in sacred spaces, but I'd love to see what's there.
I have a
Did they,
question. And a comment.
Brad,
It was
did they-
fast.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, next person. And did they bring back there was something about the antiquities
you
that they
hear me?
brought back? Were they, did they just loot the place or take back cases and cases of things that they found?
That's a great question. So they're English, so that's kind of their thing, right? They just take it and take it home, and no aspersions on, and but Americans do it too, but yes and no. And I think that's part of the thing I was talking about where they change is, and I talk about this a lot in the book because I didn't want to romanticize them, that they were some heroes. They took plenty of stuff, and Warren, who was there, took a bunch of stuff. And it talks about the Moabite Stone, which is this really important find that everyone wanted to just take home. But what's important to me is, and what's really telling is, in the end, they left something there, and they left it there on purpose. And the thing they left that I talk about, which is kind of their big find, is in a museum to this day in Jerusalem. And to me, that was just, like I said, really telling that they didn't take it and they left it knowing that it was going to be found. And they knew it was worth a lot of money, but they left it anyway because I think they knew it belonged in Jerusalem, which is very progressive for that time. Nobody left anything in Jerusalem. If they could move it, they would take it. At one point, they find a throne in this burial cave, and they all say this is Solomon's throne. King Solomon sat on the throne and judged everyone, and it's marble, and they move it out, and it takes forever. And the archaeologist just shakes his head and he says that's a toilet. But they still take it back, and they sell it for a ton of money. So yeah, that's a great question though, whoever asked that.
But did they come to, at the end, respect the archaeology more and maybe have some feelings that their role was maybe not quite appropriate, what they were doing?
I don't know if they did. That's a great question. I know that I think we do. And archaeologists now kind of looked at them as, raiders means you're a tomb robber, you're a looter, like what they did to Egypt, just take everything. Um, but yeah, they ended up, I don't know if they appreciated it because they wanted to be rich, but the people left behind really appreciate their work. They use their maps to this day in the tunnel. So I don't know if they appreciate it. I know they appreciated something, but they still, a lot of them wanted to come back. So I think their eyes were still dazzled by the Ark.
What is your next project?
I'm trying to figure that out now. I know it's not going to be. I've done 2 expeditions in a row, so I'm no more expeditions. I love expeditions, but they kind of, I don't know. I'd say my feet are sore, but I didn't really go anywhere. I have in April a graphic novel coming out. That's a retelling of 10 Days in a Madhouse by Nellie Bly. The artist is Courtney Sides from Simon and Schuster, and it's going to be really good. It was really hard to do, so I'd never done that before. But
Is this stemming from your interest in comics?
totally, yeah. But I thought, silly me, I thought, oh, that would be easy to do. I've read these things. It was so hard. It is. I have so much respect for artists of any stripe. For me to like kind of tell them what to do is just bananas. But it was really difficult to write.
Why was it difficult?
It's just, I think Nellie's story, if you don't know it, she was the newspaper reporter who had herself committed to Blackwell's asylum to expose the evils of institutionalizing the mentally ill. And she, stays there for 10 days, gets out and writes this huge story, and the whole system changes. Takes a while, but it changes in large part to her. And so it's really hard to kind of figure out how to tell that story in pictures and what's the best way, because we wanted like kind of young adults to read it too, and kind of get that, what's the best way to reach that audience too, that I've never really thought about. I mean, we came up with it because, in the last administration, they were talking about reopening mental institutions, and they've been closed for decades. So it seemed like a timely thing to talk about.
Have they supplanted graphic novels, your interest in comics?
No, but it was fun. It was fun. It was good.
Are there any more questions?
No, just a comment. Now I'd like to read the book, but I'd also like to visit Jerusalem, I think.
I would too. So, not to come off as a fraud, but I did not go to Jerusalem to write this book. Partially because, when I first came up with the idea for it, I was like, wow, now I can finally go, because I've always wanted to go. But I have we had another baby, and then the pandemic, so I wasn't going anywhere. But it actually, I think it's better that way, because if I would have went, I think the story would inevitably be Brad goes to Jerusalem, you know? Whereas this way I read their accounts of it, and so I just try and put, you know, what they felt and what they went through. And they were really, a lot of these people were good writers. And I looked at a lot of people went to Jerusalem at the early part of the century, and they wrote travel logs. So that helped with what things looked like, what they smelled like, so I think it worked out better. But yeah, I'm with you, John. Anytime you want to go,
Okay.
let's go, because it looks,
Can't go now, but did you work with the Department of Antiquity and Archaeology in the Jerusalem Museum, in the Israel Museum?
I did. I worked with, I made a good friend. I made two good friends there. And because I was trying to hunt down this last thing that they found. And it was really, really cool, because I was trying to find it and I would email them back and forth. And this guy said, "Oh, yeah, it's right here under the glass. I'm looking at it right now." And even though it's over email, it's just this really, it's really cool. I'd like to go and see that someday. I know it is difficult now. But yeah, I talked to a couple people there, and I have friends there too that helped out. When I didn't know what I was talking about, or think, to help me understand um, how complex a place it is, but how just one of a kind. There's no place like it on the planet, and
This
I've never been there. Yeah.
This is why I asked you if you worked with them, because I know many, many of them, and it depends. If you write about the Parker expedition, that's one thing. But if you write about the search for the Ark, I know that they would say it's, you know what, BS.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 So that's why it's not really. I tried to make the arc like just the thing, like it is in the movie. It's that it's the ultimate thing to go after. Um, but it's more of, what they're doing day to day. Yeah, and I definitely, I heard that many times. And but they're kind of, they like that somehow they got all this good science out of this expedition that somehow didn't know what they were doing. That's a good story too. But oh yeah, definitely.
But Brad, you must go one day to Jerusalem. It's one of the places, I don't know how else to say it, but to me, where the light is different. And I'm not particularly
It's
religious
beautiful.
at all. I'm not, I don't belong to a religion, but the light is different. And there are only 3 or 4 other places I've been where that was true.
That's a great line. I'm not going to forget that. That's good.
You can have it as a title to your next book. The light is different in Jerusalem. It is.
Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, there's I found just so many stories, um, just of people who went there and were like kind of Americans who were there, and um, just all different. It's just endless.
It's amazing how many layers there are to Jerusalem.
Oh, wow.
If you go underground, and what's down there is just incredible. Even the walls of the city, what's below can't be compared, or has to be compared to what's above, because above is little stones, but what's downstairs is incredible.
Yeah.
Go.
I'll go right now. Okay.
So then the ark can be a mile down below. That's
Yeah.
Can't just dig above.
That's a good point.
Similar thing in Athens. Why isn't that? Didn't people sweep up the dust back in those days? Things just got buried.
True.
But yeah, it must be difficult to do any construction, any kind of storm drains, things like that. They must have to be really careful.
Yeah, that's a big problem, and I know the whole they're building or they're going to build on the hill where they did a lot of the excavation too. So there's always, yeah, but it's something about, and someone explained to me that it's partly that it's like you said, it's all layers, and it's also the temperature and the humidity, and it's like perfect for preservation. But all it takes is like one wrong shift, and then it goes to dust. Very tenuous, but yeah, I always wanted to be an archaeologist too, but this kind of,
Not late. You
lets
still
me be a
have
fake
man.
one. I have to
So
go
ki-
dig out I'm digging out cars from the snow. Does that count?
Come to
I
North
think
Salem and we'll find you the X-Men.
I
Oh,
think
I'd
we
love
have
to.
one participant, Billy Morin. Are you there? You wrote something in text I saw, who is an archaeologist and
Really?
who has participated in archaeological digs in Egypt, I know. Billy, are you still there? Maybe just with text.
I think he's gone.
Volunteers can apply. Thank you, Billy. That sounds great. I need a vacation.
Someplace warm.
Yeah. A lot of hard work, I'm sure. Yeah, one of the most successful archaeological things going on right now is that they have volunteers go through the trash. And I forget the name of the project. You've heard of this, from the Temple Mount, that they're doing like building and stuff there, and they're not looking for stuff, and they just dump it, and all these volunteers are going through the trash and finding fragments and coins and all this stuff that's priceless in terms of knowledge. So yeah, it's really fascinating. Thank you, Billy. I'll check that out. Maybe I could send my kids, huh?
To go through the trash. Maybe you can get them to take out your trash, might be.
Yeah,
No,
that'd
there-
be a start. I was gonna say one thing at a time.
There's a book, Trash.
Yeah, history of trash. Actually, I bet that would be a bestseller. I'm sure somebody's written that.
Well, I don't know. A lot of the history of North Salem comes out of the old outhouses where everything was thrown.
Really?
Oh, yeah. China, glass, not so much paper because it doesn't survive, but
Yeah.
you can reconstruct the era. And
Oh, interesting. Really? So who's digging in there, Susie?
at the moment, I don't know, but people have. Ask Robert Treadway. He would be
Okay.
there like in the shot. But people have. And when a site is found, not professionals, I don't think, but locals. And that's where a lot of our little broken artifacts are from.
Huh, how interesting. I didn't know that.
Well,
know,
if you have an
Susie-
outhouse on your property, check it out.
Hmm.
Susie, you can invite Brad to come and visit North Salem. That's not Jerusalem. And then you see Salem Center, and you can go to Colley's Drive and
Driveway.
all those places, right?
I'd do that in a second.
Well, you're welcome.
Salem is open and we are open for you.
All right, I'm gonna hold you to it.
Thank
Anyway,
you so
thank you,
much,
Brad.
Brad.
Thanybody you very much for this. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments? There's been a bunch of people saying thank you so much. Looking forward to reading your book.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Usually I go, thank you for braving the elements and, you know, but now you're just at home, so that's cool. You get to just, have a good evening. Everyone have a book to recommend? I always like to.
Recommend.
Book to
end with that.
recommend.
Fiction
Oh.
or non-fiction?
Anything.
Push. Push, a book called Push.
Okay.
And Letters to My Daughter by Maya Angelou.
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah.
And Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf.
Yeah.
Our
More?
book club just read a book. One of our book clubs at the library just read a book on Stalin, the biography of Stalin by Oleg Plefniuk, which sounds pretty grim, but it's actually a wonderful book, and it's not
Really?
not Simon Montefiore's book of the biography of Stalin, which is like 800 pages.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is a reasonable 250 or something like that. It's a
Oh,
wonderful book. Yeah.
really? Well, I'll check that out.
Okay, let's go.
I feel like The Great Hedge of India. That sounds good. I feel like I could do 250 of Stalin, but not 450.
No, I know. Anyway, thank you very much, Brad. So,
Thank you, Brad.
and
Thanks for
everybody,
having me, everybody.
and Brad, get our newsletter and join in our programs. We'd love to have you come.
I
Okay?
will. You have some terrific people coming out.
We do. We have some really good people.
Yeah.
We have a great team. We're having a lot of fun with this. Susie and I are, I mean, everybody is participating, that making suggestions, but Susie and I are having a lot of fun, sort of. She's the one who saw you and suggested that we get you. So,
Oh, thank you, Susie. No, it's a very good list and very eclectic too.
well, we take anybody who shows up, sort of, not really, we don't, actually, that's not true. But the Zoom has been fun because you can, contact
Yeah.
someone and people are quite willing to do it, I think. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
people like to talk about their work, and it's an easy thing to do, you can have the speaker, of course, has to do the preparation, but and plan the talk, but it's it's an hour or two, and it's enlightening and it's interesting, and you don't have to leave your house, and it's sort of fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks
You
for
were
having me. It
so
was great
interesting. It was
to
great.
meet you.
Thank you.
And looking
And-
forward to welcome you here.
I'm telling you, I'm gonna come.
Okay,
I'm
put your
not
mask on.
kidding
and-
around. That's like my Mecca here. Pop culture lame Mecca, not real Mecca, but yeah.
That's wonderful.
Someday, I promise.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
again.
Thank you.
Everybody stay
Okay.
safe in the snow, okay?
We will,
You
and you too.
You too.
Bye
Bye,
now.
everyone.